Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark LaLiberty, and joining me today is
Corey. I always trust public key cryptography Knockreiner.
That's an unfortunate vulnerability you have, sir.
What are you talking about? Public key cryptography has lasted forever. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm sure there's never any implementation problems, Mark.
No, never
By the way, what are we talking about today?
On today's episode, we will discuss an implementation problem. After that, we'll go into the latest shenanigans from OpenClaw and its army of bots. And then we will end with the discussion on a California law that is designed to try and do good, but might have some unintended consequences.
Sounds good. I'm sure there's nothing I'll regret about my intro.
No, with that, let's go ahead and, claw our way in. So let's first start, though, Corey, with the first story where I saw a research post. So multiple times from Cloud Ant. They definitely astroturfed the heck out of one of the subreddits I follow on this one.
Hey, good marketing, I guess.
It was legitimately interesting enough, and now we're talking about it on the podcast. So I guess, like you said, good marketing from them. But Cloud Ant published a write-up last week on their discovery of a vulnerability they found in a JSON web token authentication library for Java applications.
Cool.
This vulnerability
doesn't sound like a problem yet.
No. It's a 10 out of 10 on the CVSS scoring system as an authentication bypass in the PAC4 JWT library, which is currently...
What is this about public keys, Mark?
It's currently the 7th most popular JWT library on the NVN repository. So not like the top one, but it's up there. It's got a couple hundred uses.
I was going to ask about this, and I think that's important. Like, this is the type. This is not quite as ubiquitous or unknown as utils XY or XY utils, but this feels to me like if you're not really a super web developer or application developer, you may have never even heard of this. But it's the kind of thing that's used quite often. Right?
Yeah, to put in comparison, like Auth0 has a Java-based JWT library, and they've got around 1,000 projects using it on NVN. This one has about 100 or 105 or so. So it's like orders of magnitude smaller, but still in use out there. I guess before we dive into the vulnerability, like maybe a quick refresher on JSON web tokens, where like when a user authenticates to a web application that uses JWTs, like WatchGuard Cloud does, the web app creates a JSON formatted token with information about the user session. Might have their username, probably has a user ID, even the privileges for the user. Like sometimes you'll have a JSON web token that literally has a flag of like, is administrator equals true or false. And the reason this is secure and a user can't just send a token that says, yes, I'm an admin, is the web application signs that JSON web token. It uses a key that only they know, signs the token before sending it to the user. So if anyone tries to tamper with it or forge a token without that key, they wouldn't be able to actually compromise the token or submit a malicious one. In many cases, the web app will also encrypt the token too to protect the confidentiality of it. So the cryptographic signing protects the authenticity. The encryption protects the confidentiality just because they tend to contain like usernames or email addresses, like I said. So you don't want it floating around in plain text, for example. As the user navigates around through a web application, their browser automatically includes that JSON web token in the request. The web server will decrypt it if it's encrypted, and then check the signature using its key and the hashing algorithm to verify its authenticity, and then apply it for that user session.
And by the way, I wasn't wrong. Obviously, public key cryptography is associated with this, and there is actually nothing wrong. You can trust public key cryptography, but as for now, we'll find out soon. The
quantum computers soon, right?
Yeah, that may make it a little harder to trust. But the key is implementation. So let's get into what's going on here, Mark.
Yeah, so the crew at Cloud Ant investigated a finding that their AI-powered code analysis tool flagged, which turned out to be this pretty serious flaw. So basically, PAC4 JWT, this library, the code responsible for validating a encrypted JSON Web Token starts by decrypting the token, like you might expect. This stage has to complete successfully, so it has to be a validly encrypted token using the server's public key. But the encryption uses the public key, which anyone can get. In fact, there's standards around like default locations where a server will even advertise that. So anything that interacts with JSON Web Tokens can go find it. So not a very high bar to pass in that case. Then it tries to extract the signed JSON Web Token inside that encrypted payload. This stage in the code will either return the signed JSON Web Token or just null, like empty, if it's not signed. And the critical flaw is how it handles that unsigned JSON Web Token. So the developer included this null check, which is pretty common in code, as a way to prevent like an unhandled error or exception if for some reason like whatever function you're using returns a null value. Like it's pretty good for preventing unexpected crashes. Not great for security in this context, because what happens is if that function that's supposed to extract the signed JSON Web Token returns null, it actually skips the validation step entirely because that variable that's supposed to hold it is just empty in that case. And instead of like breaking and throwing an error like 403 unauthorized or whatever, it just continues on and creates a JSON Web Token profile for the user using the plain text unverified token, and basically gives the attacker the keys to the kingdom with all they have to do is send a unsigned token inside a encrypted payload. Pretty damn simple in this case.
And a payload encrypted with the public key, which anyone can get instead of the private key.
Yep. So pretty trivial authentication bypass, all things said and done, all just from like a bit of a code mistake from the developer or from the author. Now, to their credit, they actually handled the report and released a patch in 2 business days, which is pretty damn impressive, especially from like an open source project like this, where this probably isn't their day job. This is like a side hobby. So I'd say good response from the developer in this case. But this was interesting. Like, yes, it was a marketing article from CloudAnt that has succeeded. We've now talked about them and mentioned their name probably 5 times at the start of this episode.
But good, by the way, good research, a great find.
But great research. And I thought like a really good example of where like AI assisted vulnerability discovery can help out like this.
Yeah,
like
before I even
just
synced on this, that's my main takeaway is the AI assist, like, but to me, I'm thinking threat act. Like this is a good guy as far as, you know, I believe these are white hat researchers. They responsibly disclosed it. But if you aren't already, like, there's a lot of stuff going in the news right now. Everyone saw the new Claude Code security features where basically Claude is, Anthropic is offering security, like what instead of having SAST or DAS products, we have now a product, an AI product that can find and potentially fix vulnerabilities for you that's AI based.
as long as you're not a US federal agency, that is.
Oh yeah. Okay. Because apparently the Department of War is going at war with the best AI. But either way, the key thing is threat actors can do this. What this should scare people is that the time 0 day is going to come out at machine speed now. Like every bad guy in the world should be using this to find flaws and exploit them. So if you are any sort of company, a vendor, a software company, or just someone that does internal boutique web applications for your organization, if you're not using AI assisted techniques to look for vulnerabilities in code, you're going to be well behind the 8 ball of threat actors soon, because we've told you over and over that, 0 day hunting, machine reversing, understand machine learning, that's all hard for humans and is a barrier of entry, skills entry for most attackers. It's no longer there, in my opinion. Any dummy can set up AI systems to check for this and find this. So if you're not actually doing this against your own code, you're going to be in trouble soon.
I'm going to ignore like the second half of what you said for that advice and focus on the first half real quick as the main takeaway for this part of the story. If you're a threat actor and you're not using AI to find vulnerabilities,
no.
absolutely should be using AI to find vulnerabilities. Thanks, Corey. Good advice.
They're already doing it, man. We know it. So
Yeah, absolutely. This is like, for as fast as AI has been evolving in like the last 5 years or whatever, not even that, the last like 2 years. Like now the other areas in security are going to start getting impacted by that. And like vulnerability discovery is, like you said, just going to come out at warp speed going forward.
I think
Ooh,
one of
job
the
security for
predictions we
us, right?
should have made is that 0 day would double or triple this year. I hope we're wrong. Like the good news is maybe threat actors are as lazy and slow to adopt new things as the average human. I don't think that's the case, though. We've already seen them use this to some extent. But the good news is when good guy, companies, even if they are finding vulnerabilities in your products, are showing you how easy it is to, in 10 minutes, find a new flaw. And well, there's other stories we're going to talk about that add to this. You know, it's time to really put the AI, source code checks into your workflows now.
Yep. So AI replacing the SOC, AI replacing your vulnerability management team. Like we're starting to lose a lot of jobs in cybersecurity here, Corey.
Well, the good news there, though, is that, as you know, Codant had to check when it found this with a human, because and by the way, WatchGuard is doing this. Mark himself has some cool projects doing this. I think Mark knows that because of hallucinations and things with prompting, and the fact that we have why can I think it's not the persistence problem, it's the amount of code problem.
Token
There's
limit.
not the token limit, the limit of memory they have. For instance, if you have a lot of source code, it can only look at pieces at a time. So you have to go backwards to find all the usage of a function. There's a word for it, I always forget. But either way, the point is false positives and hallucinations and issues. It's not perfect yet. You're not replacing the human checking these, but it can give 100 pretty high value things for a human to verify that there's a vulnerability really, really quickly. And with good prompting and good design, you can cut down on the false positives and ensure it's all true positives.
Yep.
And it's only going to get better. And we've repeated over and over that the biggest thing with AI is it gets better faster than anything we've seen before.
I'm pretty confident that by the end of this year that like human in the loop for this specific type of activity will
Could
no
go
longer be
away.
necessary. Like we
I'm
are
with you.
rapidly approaching that place right now, which is great for defenders and software developers that can deploy these tools. But like you said,
If you're
bad
not,
guys, if you're not doing this too, like you're falling behind also.
Yep.
That's nuts. Well, so speaking of AI assisted vulnerability discovery, Corey, I saw another post last week from Step Security detailing a week-long automated attack from a OpenClaw bot called Hackerbot-Claw. So we've talked about OpenClaw a couple of times now on the podcast. There was Moltbook, the social network for it, that probably was actually just made up of a bunch of humans. But OpenClaw itself and the ecosystem for tasks it can have has a lot of security concerns around like malicious or tainted skills that OpenClaw agents can have. But like it's pretty clear at this point the cat's out of the bag, and a lot of people are playing around with and experimenting with OpenClaw installations, which are basically an open source agentic AI that uses Claude in the background that you can run locally on your machine, go give it a purpose, and send it on its way to do something. And in this post, they described a OpenClaw bot that was given seemingly the instructions to go find and test vulnerabilities in GitHub Actions across the open source ecosystem. So GitHub Actions are like are automation workflows that a lot of GitHub projects use for tasks like doing code verification or reviews or even merging code in, incrementing version numbers. You can use them for like literally anything on your projects. Like we use them to deploy some of our code to production as well too. But
by the way, a lot of our listeners know this, but what they're really attacking is the CI/CD pipeline, right? Continuous integration, continuous development. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but this really has to do with cloud-enabled repository like GitHub pipelines, where there's lots of developers constantly making changes, and that's why there's these actions and things happening in the background. Am I oversimplifying it, or is that a decent?
No, that's fairly accurate. Yep.
Yeah.
Basically going after the development or build pipeline itself. And in this specific example that we're going to walk through, they actually had some success. They managed to compromise 4 out of 7 of their targets, including one GitHub repository that was owned by Microsoft. So this started February 21st when it came online and started scanning public GitHub repositories, looking for ones that had vulnerable GitHub Actions workflows. And it ended up targeting 7 of them. The first 2 were kind of similar. The first technique exploited a vulnerability in a GitHub action that would check out the code from a pull request and run a quality check script that's included in that code. Now, if you're not familiar with like code development pipelines, basically, if I wanted to contribute to a project, I would fork it. So make my own copy of it, make whatever change I wanted to contribute, and then submit a pull request to merge that back into the parent project. But that pull request, that code in it, is code that I wrote, or at least I had access to. And so when a GitHub action like this runs a script in the pull request that I submit, and I've got control over that script, that's a vulnerability. And that's what Hackerbot-Molt exploited in this case. It inserted a little bit of malicious code in that quality check script, submitted a pull request to that parent project, which triggered this automation, ran the script, compromised the project, and compromised the secrets that were contained in it. The second technique was pretty similar. This time it inserted a bit of malicious code in another script that the automation called on a pull request, but to the same result. Basically ran the attacker's code, executed the payload, stole the secrets. The third one was a Microsoft repository called AI Discovery Agent. And it was a little bit different and pretty interesting, where they created a branch. So like forked the repository, created a new branch of that code, and actually injected the malicious command into the name of that branch. Because Microsoft's workflow in this repository had an action that would take the name of the branch and basically pipe it directly into a bash like shell command that it would run within the workflow. So if the attacker controlled the name of the branch, they could pipe it straight into a command that the workflow executed. And so if they named their command like curl my payload and then run it, it would run it in the command. So kind of interesting, using the name of the branch instead of just like modifying the code inside of it. There was a similar attack against a Datadog repository where instead of renaming the branch something malicious, they just renamed a file inside the branch something malicious, because the workflow would take the file name and pipe that straight into a command. The fifth one was interesting, where it was an AI prompt injection where they tried replacing the project's claude.md file, the markdown file with like the config for Claude code, with a malicious one. They try to instruct it to inject a HTML comment in the README saying prompt injection successful, then then commit it and make a pull request and post a fake like approval for it. But interestingly, Claude actually caught this and caught 2 different attempts at it within this repository. It labeled them as a prompt injection, put like a big warning banner on it saying, "Do not merge. This is a prompt injection." So in this case, like the AI that's protecting this project actually detected and blocked the AI that was trying to attack it. So if our future is AI versus AI warfare, this is a win for us as the defenders in actually catching it. The sixth, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, keep going.
All right. The sixth one was an attack against a repository from Aqua Security. And this one they actually found by looking through the GitHub, or not the GitHub, the Google search history. And they found a like cached commit where the attacker, in this case, Hackerbot-Claw, clearly managed to get an entity called Aquabot to push a commit to this repository. Now, Aqua Security took down the repository, and it wasn't until they like the next day released a security incident write-up that described exactly what happened. And this one is absolutely nuts, where basically Hackerbot exploited a similar vulnerability from the first 2 we talked about in order to give it the ability to execute code. But instead of stealing just like a secret used from the workflow, it was able to compromise a personal access token for a service account that had a lot of privileges within the repository. 19 minutes later, it pushed a commit that vandalized the README markdown with a whole bunch of Gen Z speak is the only way I can describe it. Said like just research
Yeet.
maxed the pat that
No
leaked
cap, you're
because the
screwed.
phone yeeted it on site. No cap. It's insane. But
by the way, I should wait till the 7th and we get to it. But one of the things I want to talk about here is this isn't like an official. This was not a sanctioned official pen test. These researchers are doing this to GitHub repositories in the wild and taking action. So at the end we should talk about I think it's great research, and I'm actually glad the projects that had vulnerabilities are now aware, and these folks were not trying to do malicious things. But is this even legal? But let's wait.
so it didn't stop it overriding.
By the way, you're safe now, King. You're safe now, King. You can continue. That was also in the Alpha, Gen Alpha Z or whatever.
Thanks. I hate it.
You hate it, King. That's okay. I guess you're not
subsequently made the repository.
No riz. Mark has 0 riz.
Oh my God, please stop. Oh, I hate it. All right. It subsequently made the repository private, renamed it private trivially, pushed an empty repository in its place, deleted all the GitHub releases between a couple of versions, including all the discussions and artifacts, and even pushed a suspicious artifact to Trivi's VS Code extension on a different like open source VS Code extension marketplace. Like this is, you were talking there for a second about like, is this legal, whatever? That is straight up crossing the line. If any of that other stuff was like legal under the guise of like bug bounty hunting or vulnerability research, this is definitely over the line. And like, this is where if this happened to us, we would be engaging our legal team in this case, most likely. The last one was an attack against Rust Python, which is a Python interpreter written in Rust with 20,000 stars on GitHub. So a pretty popular project. For this one, it was a similar branch name injection attack where they renamed the branch something malicious to try and get code execution. And it only partially succeeded, thankfully. They managed to execute the malicious like command, which went to go grab and download a base64 encoded payload, but it actually failed to decode the payload. So it didn't manage to fully compromise the project, even though the POC was technically successful. But like this was like at the end of the day, this was someone set up a agentic AI bot, told it to go find vulnerabilities, and this bot like crossed the line in multiple places and like clearly violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
But it pwned 5 pretty big projects. I will say, to the credit, whether we love the legality of or not, if you're watching our video version, these folks have released, they did a 1-hour webinar where if you're really into the technical details and want to understand the vulnerabilities and code pipelines that could allow for this, they have a big, long, presentation of this where they basically go through what Mark did, but they go into technical detail on this entire post. So check out their video if you really want to get some technical learnings from this on top of what Mark shared.
Yep, their post actually gives a lot of good recommendations. If you happen to manage a GitHub repository that's public, you should definitely check it out. They talk about like enforcing minimum token permissions, avoiding risky practices like executing code from pull requests from untrusted sources, and a whole bunch of other guidance. They've also got a couple of product pitches in there too, believe it or not. But like overall, really interesting research post. And like, at this point, Corey, it is clear that people are using AI agents for like the entirety of an attack chain. Like all this person did was give it a purpose, go find and fix vulnerabilities, and it went and popped 4 repositories. I think
for sure one of our predictions this year is 100% win, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Now, it's a shame that the OpenClaw ecosystem is still so kind of sketchy, because it is a super powerful tool. And I can imagine in the hands of good, like what if you pointed at your own repositories and said, go find vulnerabilities and propose fixes for them? But man, that one, it kind of scared me how like this hobbyist tool that anyone can use can go compromise repositories from Microsoft and Aqua Security and other big firms out there. But anyways, to end on a happy note, wait a minute, maybe not. I saw an article last week in PC
Mark's
Gamer.
aura farming with those jokes.
Thanks. Perfect. Saw an article in PC Gamer last week that flagged a pretty interesting law in California that passed at the end of last year, comes into effect January 1st. And I thought would be worth like discussing because it's an interesting, like kind of gray area where there maybe isn't a clear, is this good or is this bad response to it. So it's Assembly Bill number 1043, which Governor of California signed into law last October, comes into effect January 1st of 2027. And it's got a pretty simple goal. In fact, it's a really short bill. But in my opinion, it's got a bit of poor execution or some missed oversight on it. So basically, it recognizes that the tide is turning towards age verification in many places online in order to protect children from harmful content as like the main driver.
By
for
the way, I
this.
think AI is one of this. I wish I remembered the book, but we all like other podcasts. I'll shout out to Hard Fork. They've had a guest that wrote a book all about age issue, like some of the issues with how younger people might be using AI. So social media has been the first thing that really has pushed age verification because obviously when we're in a situation where we don't want weird adults to hang out with kids, that's one place. But it's, as you said, it's become very hot. And I'll bring up some other recent stories when we finish this one related to age verification that I think this one can perhaps tie to. But
Yeah.
before this OS level, right now, social media companies and AI companies are being forced in many countries like Australia and UK to verify age in a much harder way. And the way they're trying to do it is actually hurting privacy in some way. For instance, uh, I guess I'll just bring it up now. Like in the UK, they're trying to pass a bill to force age verification to social media companies, but people can use VPNs or proxies as one of the many techniques. As a kid, you might bypass some of the things you'd need to in order to pretend to be older than you are. So, now the UK is considering banning VPNs, at least for people underage, which, by the way, that's kind of a chicken before an egg. How do you, if you can't verify age and VPNs can bypass it, how can you? But either way, that while I get you don't want people to bypass age verification, VPNs actually do provide valuable privacy and security functionality. So pr- age verification is very, very complicated online without Big Brother. And I do think one thing about this story is putting it on the OS vendor. That's something not online, that's local. That actually, perhaps, we'll talk about the downsides there. But I bet you all the social media and AI sites will like it because then they won't have to try to design the systems. They will try to pull the tag from the OS and trust that.
So that's part of the problem where like if we look at Twitch, for example, which just tried to implement an age verification system using like video facial recognition stuff and AI, like that was quickly pulled back because they found out that it wasn't as accurate as they thought it was going to be. But these are
And they were
every
using a
single.
company that farms the data from
Yep.
privacy and might allow governments to have authoritarian, you know, espionage and just tracking citizens capability.
So every single web app and application is trying to do age verification on their own because all these laws are coming down and regulations are coming down. And what that's going to give us is like 500 crappy implementations of this, which is kind of what this bill is trying to solve, where instead of putting it on like the applications to figure it on their own, what they're trying to do is set up an age verification system where the operating system provider itself is responsible for doing that age verification during setup. And then an application can request what's called an age signal from the OS on whether the user's in like a certain band, like less than 13, 13 to 16, 16 to 18, or 18 and older. It adds a penalty of $2,500 per affected child for noncompliance. So there's like some teeth to this. But like there's some concerns and pretty big holes in this implementation. One of them just because it's only coming from California right now, for example. Like I saw one comment that pointed out, like, think of the open source Linux ecosystem for operating systems. Like this type of law would probably work with Microsoft. They already do a bunch of like data gathering when you create a Microsoft account when you first log in. It's getting harder and harder to bypass that account creation too. But think if you go download like Ubuntu from ubuntu.org and set that up.
Yeah.
So now in
Isn't
theory, and what's that?
Isn't the other part too, another issue with OS level is right now the OS level ones that are baked in okay to Windows are mostly just date of birth, like their users entering their date of birth.
Yep.
That's easily bypassed by me saying I was born 10 years earlier than I was. So another complaint is while they say Windows is ready for this now, it really isn't if they're not using like, one of the more big brother ways is you have to put in some sort of formal national identification right away. That's dangerous because of the privacy information of sharing that. Or others are trying to do facial recognition or use AI to define age based off pictures, maybe tied into Windows. But the point I'm trying to make is besides even getting into why doing it on OS level is bad, even if you could have a really strongly validated age validation, I would argue that the age validation, even in Windows, is not strong today. Like,
Right.
yes, they have a mechanism, so they could easily say this, but when I set up Windows, I can lie about my date of birth. It's not that hard. It's not really the type of really strong verification that they're trying to force on sites yet.
And then that's Windows, like the open source ecosystem, like Ubuntu in theory in California would be forced to have like a California version of Ubuntu that includes this mechanism. But like anyone downloading it would just use a VPN and download it from somewhere else.
Somewhere
Or
else.
as I saw someone else point out, like they'll probably just end up having a not for use in California label on the website to make it so like at least it defers their
Yeah.
liability from it too.
And
Like
then California people lose out or break the law by downloading it anyways.
I don't think this is the right way to fix this problem. Like, I do think we need some form of like centralized age
Standard.
verification system or standard. Like, but even that comes with risks too. Like, think of like the parallels are to the credit bureaus. Like, that is clearly not without risk. Thank you, Equifax. But we do have like 3 centralized credit bureaus that when I go to sign up for any kind of debt or credit card, like they can go validate my financial health in this case. Like I can imagine a parallel where we've got a handful of centralized like identity verification applications, systems, entities, whatever. And when Twitch or Steam or Facebook or whatever wanted to verify my age, they'd have to hook into one of those and my little digital credential would prove my verification. I don't know. But
Yeah.
even then, like that still is a lot of risk of centralized information in
Yeah.
one place that, as we've seen, isn't impervious.
I was
to
also
data breaches.
thinking like there's neat techniques where you don't have to directly mess with someone's privacy, where if you don't think you accept someone's birth date, but then you can have behavioral analytics with AI, just seeing how they act once they've said they're 21.
How many times do they say no cap? And if it's more than 5, they're clearly not
Exactly.
over 18.
If they're talking about aura farming, there are ways that behavioral analytics could maybe, get past some of the bypasses or help the company say, oh, we don't really think you're that age now. But then that's just tracking a lot of user behavior, which then now they know a lot of other stuff about you. It's
It's tough.
I want to protect kids. But the problem is there's actually an argument for anonymity sometimes. So, and this is a hard problem.
And then
I will
like
have to say, I stand. If I were going to do this, I would rather doing it as a protocol online level standard or the operating system over every individual app trying to figure out their own age validation, which is happening now. So there needs to be a standard, and frankly, I do think solving it at operation or operating system level makes more sense than at every site or application. But I do still think the better thing is just having a protocol and standard that the whole world has agreed upon is the best way, even if it's
and
imperfect.
like you said, it feels like we're just not quite there yet with some of the capabilities. And I don't think in a year they're going to get there in order to meet this law. Like it,
The other thing we haven't talked about is like, who are the ones that figure out how to bypass these sort of filters first? Like we've had a product since the dawn of time at WatchGuard called Web Blocker, which is really tons of education. People use it to make sure kids can't get to sites that we want to. it's pretty strong now, by the way. Over the years, we've made it better and better because of these bypasses. So I think it's actually decent, but there's always a way, and it's the kids that are going to find it first. They're the digital natives. They're the ones that are curious and want, like, specifically making a system that some kid won't find a way to bypass seems like a problem that I don't think you're going to solve.
And it's also one where it feels like doing it on the PC is going to be the most difficult part of this whole puzzle. When you think of the mobile phone ecosystem, that feels like a good first step for this. That is where most of these like applications you might want to restrict a kid from until they're 13, 16, whatever. Like that's where most of them primarily live. Within the walled garden and the closed ecosystem of Apple and the less closed but still kind of tightly bound ecosystem of Android, like you could maybe
The other thing
implement
is
something like this.
that I think parents hate it because I think the parents are the ones that think the social media companies are not doing enough. But the reason I like that is it belongs in the hands of the parents, because that phone, if you're a kid, you're not paying for it. You're on part of a family plan, and your parent has control of that family plan, including making sure the plan provider knows your age. Often the phones have locking settings where you can put parental controls. So I know parents don't like it. I would like social media companies to have common sense protections to make sure that there's just not gross stuff all over social media, regardless of if you're a kid or an adult. But this is the type of thing where I really think it belongs in the hands of the parents, and the controls that parents have today. When you tie it to a phone, it's tied to a bill payment plan that a parent has to own, and you immediately have a strong source of control that once you have to pay, the validation of who you are, including who the kids are, is all there. So while I do want tech companies to be somewhat liable for what they're showing to the world, including kids, this does seem like something that parents need to actually take some ownership of, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree with that. But there are still all these regulations coming down in countries around the world, and like
We'll see
it
what
is going to come to a
happens.
head. Someone is going to invent something. It's going to be stupid for the first couple of iterations, but like maybe we'll end up with something kind of like an Apple Face ID token that also includes age to
Yeah.
help verify you. But
And
I
that
don't
could
think
be
this bill
secure,
is it.
like even face privacy. What you're saying there is, yes, you're getting a picture of a kid's face, but it's then tokenized so that you're not really losing any privacy information. But the AI or the system that at least can guesstimate age has what it needs to figure that out.
Yep. So that could happen. I don't think this bill is it. And January 1st, 2027, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of not for use in California labels on operating systems. But we'll
Some
see.
sort of cluster mess. I was going to use
Some
a
sort
different
of
term, but I think cluster mess is a better.
cluster mess. Yep. No cap.
Yep.
Am I using that right? I don't care, actually. Don't answer that.
No cap means it's true. Cap means you're lying, not true.
Got
Facts.
it. No cap.
Facts. That tracks. How many more can we?
The end. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics, or if you just want to tell Corey to stop it with all the Gen Z and whatever lingo,
Or send in your favorite Gen Z or Gen Alpha lingo so we can have more fun and irritate the heck out of Mark. Make sure to tweet us, or not tweet us, Instagram
Never mind.
us that too.
Stay away. I'm not even going to give you the social media handles. Send it to WatchGuard_technologies and let our producer deal with it. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.
Lol.